welcome to yet another episode of Let's Talk Cyber. Today we have with us Alexandre François and Alex Ronquillo from WhoisXML API. Um, Today we have two very accomplished professionals with us, and today we will be talking about attack surface management. So if I can have you to introduce to us, to our viewers, that would be wonderful. We can start with Alexandre and then Alex.
Sure. That sounds great. So first of all, I just wanted to thank you, Ankita, for having us here today. It's really a pleasure. So I'm the head of marketing and a security researcher at WhoisXML API. You will often find me studying dangerous internet properties and working on security investigations. Often my day-to-day involves enriching internet data and trying to find connection to threat groups, phishing campaigns, and bad guys in general. With that,
Wow.
I pass on the mic to my esteemed colleague, Alex.
Thank you. Alexandre Ronquillo here, Senior Business Development Director with WhoisXML API. Spend most of my time working with the industry's leading product developers, security engineering teams, cybercrime task forces, the IBMs, the AT&Ts, the National Child Protection Task Forces of the world, really all in a unified effort to stop the bad things from happening anywhere on the global internet.
Wow. So you are the good guys.
I hope so.
We are the good, hopefully.
Good guys, but you guys don't wear the capes. Yeah.
That's right. That's right. We're the ones behind the curtain, right? Making
Behind the
sure.
curtain, yeah.
Yeah.
Only wear
And
the cape at night.
Alex here is an internet threat hunter. I'm sure most of our viewers don't know what that term means. Well, I myself don't know a lot about that. So if you could brief our viewers on that term, what skills are required to become a threat hunter? What does a roadmap look like for a threat hunter? That would be wonderful.
Sure. To some extent, internet threat hunters are, in a way, kind of professional internet sleuths, right? And what by that I mean, we're looking out into the giant internet, and we're
Mhm.
looking through, in some cases, specific networks to kind of detect, maybe isolate threats that might not be caught by traditional security systems and controls. So it involves a lot of manual work. It's a very manual process as compared to something like a block list or like a firewall or a general kind of intrusion detection system. A lot of work that threat hunters do actually ends up going into different blacklists, different block lists, different rule sets, different kind of controls, that kind of thing. That said, we could explain more about that kind of as we go along. Where we sit specifically is really around external domain name and DNS attack surfaces, which is a fairly nichey part of threat hunting. And a
Mhm.
lot of the manual work is more around identifying like particular internet properties that could present a risk, but aren't necessarily part of the rules and algorithms of current security solutions, right? You asked about, what are the skills required? What does the roadmap look like? I mean, there's a lot of threat hunters who come from traditional IT backgrounds of like help desk up to sitting in a SOC out through maybe more kind of proactive blue team, red teaming stuff. I don't know. There's really a silver bullet roadmap, so to speak. But there certainly is a lot of resources to help people getting into the field. I think SANS particularly has some really good roadmaps and courses for those who want to take it more seriously at a professional level.
Mhm.
But there's really not one particular set of skills for threat hunters. Curiosity is probably one of the leading ones, as well as maybe some healthy skepticism, right? When you're dealing with the internet. But overall, the skills can be really varied. I think in general, it's really good to have some practical, like information security experience, so what does a threat look like inside your organization, outside the organization's network. Engineering backgrounds, computer science backgrounds can be really helpful if you
Mhm.
want to go into like the reverse engineering of like malware, where a lot of the really interesting things happen, but it's not always 100% necessary. Actually, Alexander and I don't even have engineering backgrounds.
I would,
We're
yeah.
mostly, yeah,
I'm
yeah,
I'm glad you picked that. I'm like, oh, so there's no scope for me. And Alexandra, you doesn't come from this background. So yeah, it's
yeah, yeah. Would you believe that you can work in a highly technical industry, without a master's in that, right?
I mean,
And yeah,
few years ago, who would have thought this would happen? But hey.
Here
Hey,
we
not
are.
me. Yeah, yeah. Yeah,
Yeah.
but as we're mostly learning through talking with security engineers, developers, looking into what the kind of research the industry is focusing on week to week, month to month, right? So again, I'm not sure there's a 100% clear roadmap. The security community is usually very open, I find, to new members,
Mhm.
especially a lot of people that do like open source intelligence. Those are usually very a community with very big arms that kind of go and encompass a lot of different people from different walks of life, right? They're usually more interested in what can you as an individual bring to the
Yeah,
table, and
exactly.
how does that help address threats. I've actually heard in some cases over traditional education or certifications, people want to see DIY experience. They want to see that you've ran a home lab or done like a technical blog or
Well,
something like that.
I'm happy that people are because if they were not doing it, I wouldn't be here speaking with you guys. So glad that's happening
Oh yeah,
because
oh yeah,
we,
definitely.
we need we need different perspective in cybersecurity. We can't just be sticking to traditional ways of studies and doing business. So
Oh,
wonderful.
spot on.
Yeah. And Alex, you pursued social
Mhm.
psychology, and Alexandra, you are more inclined towards the management and business side. How did you guys shift towards cybersecurity? I mean, we touched a little bit on that, but I would love for you guys to explain it, how that happened with you.
Sure, sure. I don't know. My track would be useful to anyone. It may be one of the least traditional approaches possible. But I started out in the professional esports world, actually playing, video games, a little bit before it gained a lot of attention in like the early 2010s. So, among that community of like turbo nerds, right, there was a lot of us who knew people who were writing exploits for online games. And sometimes that was just modifying the way the game looked so they could play it a certain way. Other
Mhm.
times it was kind of breaking the game to try to get some kind of unfair advantage, right? But it's funny because a lot of those people I still know from those communities have actually grown to become malware analysts, threat
Wow.
hunters, red teamers, blue teamers. It's very interesting to see. But at the professional level, I happen to kind of go from esports to various strategic business development consulting roles, really the world of sales. And I first fell in love with like the physical safety and risk world. Back at Brady Corporation, I was walking through manufacturing plants, chemical, oil, gas plants, looking for anywhere that someone could get hurt, or there could be some kind of a security access point, or a lot of the same things that someone who doing attack surface management might do, but at a physical level. And what drew me to cybersecurity was, as I was walking through those plants, I noticed the insane amount of
Yeah.
internet connected technology, that would be bad if someone were to compromise, right? So
Yeah.
that naturally pushed me into security by kind of really leveraging like business acumen, and really happy I found my home with Who is XML. But Alexander, I'll pass it off to you there.
Yeah, thanks, Alex. So first of all, I really liked the gaming component you brought, and the experimentation and the curiosity elements you've mentioned. I think that's a very big and important part of the job here, and that's something I really enjoy. Now, shifting to my background, so as Ankita pointed out, like I wasn't working in cybersecurity before. My first few jobs, they were actually in marketing. Then about 3 years ago, I started to write about cybersecurity when I joined WhoisXML API. Then the good thing about working for WhoisXML API is you can get access to a lot of data, and from data you can experiment a lot, and you can look into well, security data and footprints, and over time, like by practicing and a lot of trial and error, you end up getting a little more familiar with cybersecurity and investigation techniques. Now, in a sense, I would actually argue that cybersecurity is just very, very connected to business. And I wouldn't necessarily even call it a career shift on my end. Like, and by that I mean, I find a lot of business rationale in cybersecurity. Like cybersecurity decisions, they are made based on like any other decision in business, really, like cost benefit, but also a perceived risk. So when you're going to invest into cybersecurity, you obviously want to improve your security posture. And by doing that, you hope to reduce your likelihood of being exposed and being part of the data breach. And even if you're part of a data breach, your ability to demonstrate that you have a good security posture that can help you, because with a good security posture and being able to show that to the public, you can recover faster. And in turn, that will also probably reduce your liability cost. So basically, I think when you look at it that way, I would treat cybersecurity risk very much like as part of broader business risk. And since you cannot just invest in every cybersecurity technology out there, and there are just so many of them, like you're always looking at the return on investment that you're gonna get. So that's pretty much about my background.
Awesome. So interesting. I'm really, really happy that I'm speaking to you guys today, because every time I speak, I have a podcast. Mostly these people come from a technical background, and it's really hard to, because I'm still learning and understanding how the technology side of things works. Of course, I'm having that out of the box perspective is really required in cybersecurity, but sometimes really helpful what you're talking about. So I think coming from a business background or a background that doesn't relate to cybersecurity, it is easy for you to explain it in your own words. That is what I love about cybersecurity, that anyone is welcome in this industry. um, so if we talk about attack surface management, and if I were to ask you to explain it to our viewers in a most easiest way possible, how would you do that?
Sure. So I can probably help answer that. So I think on the one hand, I'd like to give you a bit the textbook definition that I found on the internet. And basically, when I typed in attack surface management, it gave me the following. And we're talking about the sum of the different points where an attacker can enter or extract data from your systems. So if I bring it to, I think the way I'd like to explain it, I think you're looking at all the different ways that you are exposing yourself to cyber attacks. So let me maybe illustrate with an example. Like if you are a homeowner, you might be very concerned to expose yourself to robberies, and perhaps you are exposing yourself because you are keeping your doors unlocked for some reason, or you have a spare key and you hide it very, very near to your entrance door where everyone basically know that it's there. Or maybe you have a cracked window, or you have a security alarm, but it's old and defective. So here we are talking about all the different vulnerabilities of your home, and basically of you living in your home. And I would say this is part of your home attack surface. And threat actors or robbers in this case, like, they can try to really exploit those vulnerabilities to break in. So I think this logic, you can kind of apply it at different level of businesses. Like you wouldn't want to let anyone into your office buildings, because you have sensitive data there, you have sensitive system, and you just don't want strangers there. And I think the same apply when it comes to really the digital world.
Awesome. And Alex, I would ask you this question. Most of us think that only a company's website makes an attack surface, but this is only one small part of the puzzle. What are your views on that?
Yeah, so it's certainly more than just a website, right?
Yeah.
But what specifically, right? And this is where it starts to get in the weeds and kind of technical, right? So aside from just, let's say, a company's website, really many companies, especially large enterprises like Fortune 1000, the Global 2000, they have, dozens, if not hundreds, sometimes thousands of websites as part of their infrastructure. So you'd
Yeah.
frequently see, a US company with like a .com. That's a given, right? But their division in France may use like a maybe Amazon.fr, or maybe the Germany division is using Amazon.de, so on and so forth. There's a lot of variations of that. And under each of those domains with kind of the different top level domain ending extension, which is the .com, the .co.uk, whatever, you can expect to see even more subdomains out there. Because on one hand, you might have some subdomains that are used just internally by employees, some kind of intranet, which may or may not meant to be publicly facing. But even that sometimes is not so obvious that you should hide public access to things like that. It could also suggest maybe you have some cloud applications, some servers running on your website. They could even be part of just the company's bigger kind of DNS network infrastructure as a whole, and actively used. And you might call those maybe your known assets, right? Now, on the other hand, there may be subdomains out there. There may be domains out there that were registered with your company's brand name or organization name that maybe a dev or an IT contractor spun up in a production environment or testing at some point. But that may have been months ago. That may have been years ago. At this point, it may have been over a decade ago. And since then, there's been employee turnover. People have forgotten those projects are long gone and forgotten. So you start to have this kind of like unknown assets. It's commonly called like shadow IT or things you basically have lost track of. And it sounds like a kind of negligent error, but when you think about the scale at which like the Fortune 500 operate and how many contractors they have, it starts to be like, all right, this is going to be a given problem, right?
Mhm.
Then there's also sort of a different situation where you have like rogue assets. And people have written a lot about things like this. I particularly like UpGuard had a really good piece on that around things like let's say someone goes out there and they register like a lookalike domain with a typo variant of your brand name, right? This is happening by the thousands every day by cyber squatters, typo squatters, and these squatters, a lot of times they're abusing the brand name and the reputation. Sometimes they're selling competing products. We've seen cases where people have shown us reports of phishing websites and kind of like brand infringement websites where, as opposed to trying to get user credentials, which is probably one of the more common cases, they're actually selling like counterfeit shoes or something under like a Nike brand, for example, right? Or even pharmaceuticals, which gets very scary when you think about the implications of, the vaccine and a lot of different things like that, right?
Yeah.
So, if you're large enough and your marketing team is doing a good enough job, your name is going to appear, in the DNS in different places. Either it's yours and you know about it, it may have been yours at some time and you forgot, or it may have nothing to do with you, and you really need kind of the help of a village to go and look into that and see how do you address that someone impersonating you out on the internet.
Yeah. I have a question on that. So do
Mhm.
you think, I'm not talking about small companies, but the companies for say, Fortune 500 or any other big enterprises, say in New Zealand,
Mhm.
don't you, do you think they would know how many assets they have? Is it easy, or like, is it a question you get asked a lot? Because if I, if I'm a big company, I don't know if I need to be aware of the assets that I have, or do I may have to make a list of what assets are there?
Yeah.
So I think actually it's very hard to track because
Mm.
and here I want to kind of build on the point that Alex made earlier with Amazon. Like I'm not exactly sure how many different websites Amazon have, but here you're probably talking about website administrators who are based in 20, 30 countries. And then do they talk to each other every day? Is each of them aware of what the other guys are doing? Maybe they are not. And then maybe you just have so many new kind of
Yeah.
domains that are being registered and you lose track. I think Alex, you may have some thought on that as well.
Yeah, yeah. I've heard it firsthand from a handful of Fortune 500 companies in exactly that. I mean, there's been many cases, unfortunately, where someone on the direct IT team will go and spin up a whole new domain and pay with it with a personal credit card and never expense it just because they didn't want to go through a bunch of bureaucratic red tape internally just because they needed to do one small thing for 10 minutes maybe or run a quick test and it required them to have like a new domain name or a new IP address that's kind of partitioned a certain way or something to that effect. I think it's even harder for for smaller companies right? Who
Yeah.
don't have, let's say, the security posture where they
Exactly.
have a big budget and they have a team of a dozen people going and doing even the IT asset inventory, right?
Yeah.
I think if you ask pretty much any company over $2 million right now, exactly how many laptops do you have even? You're going to get probably different answers from the same company.
Yeah, I thought so. And I'm like, like, so how do we solve this problem anyway? Um, you know, if you if you want to have a good security posture in your organization, it's really important to know what assets you have in the company in the first place, right? So yeah,
Right.
going back to attack surface management. So what is it and why is it important, Alexandre?
Sure. So I think we kind of already covered a bit the different ways that companies can be exposed. So from there, what can they do? And I think like attack surface management as a bit of a methodology can help. And I
Mhm.
would look at it as taking steps to identify and reduce your exposure to risk. So I think we've already talked about the fact that you can have many different type of companies of different sizes, of different industries, and they may be facing different risks. So I think there is not just one way to look at attack surface management. But
Mhm.
if you think about it in the context of domain names and subdomains and digital attack surface management, like you want to be able to keep an eye on risky internet properties. So for example, like Alex mentioned, like if your brand is very prone to typo squatting, and I think all the big brands out there, to some extent, are prone to typo squatting, and they can be exploited in a sense. Like you, first of all, want to be sure that you get to know about those properties. So there are different techniques in the industry. One of them is DNS enumeration, where you're going to use open source tool to try to get a list of all the domains and the subdomains that contain your brand name. And sometimes we might be talking about thousands and thousands of properties registered over the years. And then once you know that you have so many properties out there, you're going to want to try to classify them into different risk groups. So again, like there are just so many classification techniques, but usually a good starting point is trying to understand who owns those domains. So you may be in a situation like where those domain names, they are owned by someone in your team. Maybe it's in your direct team, or maybe it's by someone else, but who is part of the same company in a different country. Or maybe some of those domain names, they are owned by your suppliers or customers. Or you may be facing a bit more of a tricky situation where you just don't know. And this is where Alex talked about rogue properties. And in a sense, these can really present higher risk to your organization. So rogue properties in the context of attribution are those properties where you just can't say like this belong to that person or that person. And so it
Oh,
can go pretty much wild in the sense that that maybe the person who owns that rogue property doesn't have bad intentions and will do nothing really with that property. Maybe they actually just registered the name by coincidence, or they are just big fans of your product, but they didn't keep their risk record public. Then you're also going to have the situation where some of those properties, they were registered really with a malicious intent in mind. And one day at some point, possibly when you least expect, like they're gonna become dangerous because they will start hosting all type of malicious content, or people will start using that domain name to impersonate you. And like if that person can get access to your customer list, like they can start sending emails and say, yeah, I'm part of this company, you haven't paid this invoice, and I want you to do it now, and those are our new bank details. And you can use domain names to do that. Or also maybe kind of another interesting example of rogue properties are subdomains. And there we've talked about sometimes like smaller organization who may have a few properties under their name, and they may not have the same type of security team to protect them, or just to have an idea of what they own and what they do not own. And sometimes threat actors can get control of root domains. They can get admin access. And then what they would do is to add a subdomain under your root domain. So if I'm the owner of a small website, like someone is going to add a subdomain before that, and they may start to resolve all type of malicious content. Now, in terms of a detection technique, that's rather tricky, because this root domain, to start with, is legitimate. It belongs to a well-known, though possibly a small or medium company. So it's not really going to flag any kind of big alert right at the beginning. But the fact that that threat actors could get access to those domains, then all of a sudden they are able to, again, execute all type of attacks. So I hope, Ankita, that more or less answers your question.
Yes, yes, and thank you so much for the detailed answer, Alexandre. I think it's really helpful to understand what exactly is attack surface management, and how organizations are using that in their benefit, or why they should be understanding the importance of attack surface management. So Alex, when it comes to modern enterprises, the attack surface is massive, right? Hyperdimensional and complex. What are the challenges you face when it comes to dealing with such a scenario? You're on mute.
Oh, sorry about that. Yeah, you're definitely right. They're very large. They're multidimensional, right? So, for instance, your network attack surface
Mhm.
could be sort of a result of vulnerabilities in your network protocols, or even how you set up that infrastructure, right? As an example, you might have open ports that are misconfigured. They might accept connections from unknown parties where they really shouldn't, right? But without knowing any better, it can be tough, right? It's just kind of a one or a zero in some interface, right? There's also kind of a software attack surface that can
Mhm.
result from kind of poor software development. It could be bugs, SQL injection vectors, a lot of a million technical things. But a lot of that stuff could allow unauthorized access to especially confidential systems and data. Some software OS vulnerabilities may even be discovered by security researchers, we find, and oftentimes they're the first ones who kind of figure it out. A lot of people that are bug bounty hunters and people kind of just toying with things to see if they can break in. And we hope usually that those people, provide that information to, the vendors, the manufacturers, what have you. But then there's also, more of the physical attack surface, and this is where I spent a lot of my earlier career of, if a threat actor were to get access to a building, and especially a building that had access to like IT machines, equipment, they could steal the devices of an employee, kind of start using that. Unfortunately, many critical facilities still only really require a confident person in a high visibility vest and like a clipboard, to get access to kind of sensitive equipment or information, right? And then we kind of enter the domain and DNS part of the world, where that's kind of the larger attack surface we talked about earlier. And there's a lot of elements to account for when it comes to that DNS kind of driven attack surface in the broadest of the terms. But that's exactly why larger companies have entire security departments to account for all of this stuff. The big companies, I find, they usually work with not just a security vendor, but multiple, and in many cases more than 20 security vendors are
Wow.
contracted for one organization.
And Alex, I actually have a bit of a story to tell here. I
Please.
don't think I ever told you that, but back when I was working for, well, for a big organization, I'm not really gonna cite the name here, but we one day we received this email, and it was sent to all the employees. And on the email it said like, hey, someone was actually hired to break into the company And we wanted to test if you guys were able to actually protect us and say anything about it, and say anything to that guy or report that guy to the proper security guys. And as it turned out, that guy who was hired, so in a sense, he was a physical penetration tester, so to speak, like he apparently just jumped over the fence and no one said nothing about it. So when that was a long time ago, and I wasn't really maybe familiar with cybersecurity today. Back in the days, but that was a big thing, and to me it kind of shows that maybe even the biggest organizations today, they may not be totally secured, and there is always room for improvement, I'd say.
Right, right.
I
All of a
totally
sudden, we'll
agree
see
with
a NIST standard for taller fences, right?
Yeah.
And if we talk about startups or
Mhm.
SMEs here, they don't want to spend on cybersecurity. Do you think the mentality is changing? Because we've seen, and I'm talking about New Zealand, we've seen exponential increase in cyber attacks and ransomware
Right.
attacks since COVID happened. So yeah, what is your take on that?
Yeah, I mean, it's tough. I mean,
Tough
the
question, right?
national, yeah, I mean the NCSA or the National Cybersecurity Alliance. I think they said like 60% small and mid-sized businesses that are hacked, they go out of business within 6 months,
Yeah.
right?
And if I talk about stats here, so New Zealand is made up of 97% of SMEs, and
Right,
43% out of that 97% is attacked. So that's a
right.
big number, you know?
Right. Yeah, and budget constraints continue to be the difficulty. I think I want to say in their survey, I think they talked to about 500
Mhm.
SMBs, and they found that the budget constraints were like 32% of the most common sort of issue that they found. Right. Well, that said, I do think SMB, the mentality is starting to catch up, and I think that may be, the most important signal. Because I mean, let's face it, the best security tools have been around forever. They're getting better and
Forever.
better every day. But have you been using them? Right?
No.
And usually, right, exactly. But the nice thing is, and we consult for a majority of the security vendor community, I can tell you there is a worldwide race right now to see what commercial entity can protect small businesses across the world as effectively as possible, knowing that that budget is going to be issue, knowing that those SMBs may not have anyone other than the CEO to answer to cybersecurity incidents or risks or anything like that, right? And if you're talking to the CEO of a company who has six ice cream stores,
Mhm.
right? He wouldn't think he has much of a cyber risk, but if you think about how many, let's say, customer records they have, credit cards, all of that stuff, as well as more sensitive kind of business documents, bank account numbers, all of that stuff, it starts to really kind of hit home. And I think there's been enough fear, uncertainty, doubt marketed in the security community that has somewhat helped push
Yeah.
the lever there. But I do think at the end of the day, you will see the big cybersecurity vendors and mid market and SMBs really have specialized boutique and more accessible security tools, right? That are getting better in availability, the cost. That said, some of the teams who do have more tech savvy people who want to do it in house, things are even getting better for them. I mean, the open source tools. At this point, you can nearly create a commercial cybersecurity vendor entity of your own just by leveraging things that are openly available, right? But even that is still, so much better than doing nothing. That a lot of really intelligent people are going into the market, and adding, new companies, launching new things. So, I hate to say that capitalism will save the world there. It probably won't, but it'll help.
Thank you. And Alex, and
Mhm.
Alexandra, you can answer this question as well. Companies collect internet traffic and data for various reasons. Who is XML API? The company that you work for, also collects and analyzes domain, IP, DNS data. My question to both of
Mhm.
you is, why do you do that? And how do you go through such a massive amount of data?
Sure, sure. Alex, I can help take that one. So yeah, I mean, gathering the domain, the IP, the DNS data. I mean, it's really the core of what we do here. And it's been happening for us since about 2010. We've been building really large footprints of data covering something like nearly 12 billion historical WHOIS domain registration records. At this point, we can see within 0.5% all of the IP addresses within use, and billions of domains, subdomains, all kinds of weird, crazy entities and artifacts. Right now, our clients are generally getting access to that aggregated data to support a ton of different use cases, mostly in security, but also in investing, in marketing, and kind of business intelligence. Everyone wants to know, what's happening on the internet and how does that affect me, right? But that's not a really easy question to answer. As to why we really do this, you can think of WhoisXML as sort of like a satellite that can get you a near real-time picture of what's happening across the internet. Again, by aggregating all of that crazy, boring technical stuff, when you bring it all together, it starts to become almost like I think the best analogy is I read a short story by Isaac Asimov not long ago called The Last Question, where essentially, the protagonist is standing in front of an unreasonably powerful supercomputer that knows every answer in the world and can compute it. And all of a sudden, the biggest existential goal becomes asking the correct question, right? So, for us, that's what really drives us. That's our back signal. That's what gets us out of bed. Is sure, we'll do all the boring parts of helping you figure out what's on the internet, but together, let's find out, how do we make that meaningful? Where do we look, and where can we make an impact?
And I think what you just mentioned here is very interesting from the point of view of security investigations, like where to look. It's often the very, very tricky question here. And some analysis, they can actually be very targeted. So for example, I wanted to maybe talk about a bit of a practical example here. And maybe you've heard of this, Ankita. Is recently the US Department of Justice ended up seizing domain names that were part of what is known as an Iranian state-owned news network. And the rationale for doing this was that the US Department of Justice believed that those domain names were used to spread misinformation. So here we're talking about kind of a large network of news site, and I had read that about only 3,000 of them had been seized, and then when you have access to a lot of OS, DNS, and IP data like the one we provide, like you can try to understand, like, hey, is there something else that's left out of that news network? Like, what kind of information can I dig into to try to identify whatever other websites that may not have been seized? Maybe they were not of interest, maybe they were too small, but still, you can try to understand, like, is there some leftovers? And actually, as part of an investigation, we did find some leftovers. So we were able to pivot on some of the data here, and we found about an additional 35 or 40 properties. And as it turned out, half of them were still active, and they were hosting news content in English, Spanish, and actually even French. So I think that kind of adds to the question of why do you want to do this, and how do you go through that massive amount of data?
Definitely.
Thank you so much. And the threat landscape is continuously evolving and changing, and that's a very big problem. From the attack surface point of view. Um, how can companies deal with this problem?
Well, maybe I can take this one, Alex, and then if you can add some thoughts and ideas. I think I'd say to first handle the first part of what you say, like, yes, the threat landscape is going up, it's evolving, it's expanding, and I think it kind of makes sense when you consider the type of world that we live in. Like even before COVID, I think a lot of organization were looking for new ways to digitalize their operations. And then when the pandemic has happened, like, I think this trend really got accelerated. And then you have companies who are today in a situation where they're very reliant on third-party technology providers. And you know, there are certainly benefits and there are reasons why you want to work with third parties. Now, having in mind that you work with more people, your attack surface gets much bigger. And I think in a sense, we see that when we look at the number of data breaches that can be traced back to third-party vulnerabilities. I think there are a few very big ones that we could mention here, but possibly I'm not going to do it. But you know, when you look at it from an attack surface management perspective, like you need to really consider everybody that you're working with. So like Alex mentioned, it's not just your company side. It can be the side of really every one of your suppliers and customers. Now, what can you do to deal with this problem and issues? I think there isn't just one solution, but in the context of DNS attack surfaces, like you probably want to stay on top of whatever internet activity concerns you. So your websites, the websites of your suppliers, of your customers, or people really trying to impersonate you with some kind of rogue assets.
Right. And I think another important kind of element to that is, I think some of the old wisdom of Sun Tzu comes back, right? You know your enemy, you know yourself. You don't need to fear 100 battles. The last part of that, I would say, probably still a little fear in those 100 battles is healthy in security. But when you're talking about, what threats do I protect myself from? Right. I mean, back in my like safety and physical risk reducing days, it didn't always make sense to prepare for an airplane to hit the plant, right?
Yeah.
Because that was fairly unlikely, especially if you're not within common flight paths, let's say, right? In the same way that maybe a dentist office isn't so concerned about a particular advanced persistent threat group that maybe especially one recently that may have been targeting security researchers specifically. So I think it's important to, and this usually isn't the work I find of the company's direct security team. Usually you'd want to outsource this kind of intelligence to security vendors and threat intelligence. But it's also important to know who is it that's interested in attacking you. What are their motives? What are the kind of techniques, the tactics that they typically use? So that way you can a little more prioritize, right? Do we go and try to prepare for a plane to hit the building, or do we maybe go and install some other physical controls in the parking lot, right? If you know sort of your enemy's tactics, that can help a little bit.
Is it coming from Sun Tzu's book? Because I've
Uh,
read Sun Tzu.
I think so. I want to say it's Art of War, but it's been a little while. I get a little hazy memory there.
And it is said that if you can't see a risk, you can't manage it.
Right.
I think gaining real-time visibility is quite important when it comes to attack surface. Would you like to add anything on that?
Yeah. I think that largely that rings true, right? If you can't see your risk, you won't be able to manage it. Thankfully, there's a lot of really savvy, really intelligent security engineers building more predictive threat models, that may be able to make some decisions before things even come into a network. So a little bit of the chicken and the egg issue there, which one comes first? I think regardless, if you have surfaces, you're going to need to have a high degree of visibility. Now, how much visibility can you afford? Unfortunately, is what it takes. For many, real-time visibility is a pipe dream. There's a lot that's required to really push a real-time visibility, and there's so many different directions that you need to look. And again, this is why kind of prioritization against common or specific techniques are important. For instance, I mean, it's no secret. Many attacks are conducted and over with in a matter of minutes to hours, right? So monitoring, let's say name servers, mail servers, dozens, hundreds, sometimes of different data points that tie back to the infrastructure that's public facing across sometimes every single domain a company owns 24/7, could be a strong control. And it's, certainly it looks good on paper. But in order to do that, you could be talking, tens of thousands, hundreds of thousands of domain names under management, maybe hundreds of thousands to millions of subdomains underneath those, especially if you're talking, a company like the sort of Fortune 500. So I think in most cases it really takes a village to do this. And you know, the world's best CISOs, I think, are savvy, and they know, hey, we have existing domains. Maybe we'll start off with a great domain registry like CSC or Mark Monitor, who offer you know, really strong domain management and security offerings. And then, you know, on the rogue assets, the things that are out there, they may work with other brand protection companies who can help them identify who is it that's impersonating me, and can you go take care of it for me so I can focus on running my business? Can you do the monitoring? Can you do the takedown? You know, you might want to make sure that you know, the providers you reach out to already have, you know, partnerships set up, great data sources, you know, with the registries of the domains, the internet service providers, so they can really take advantage of, you know, the larger Venn diagram of collection networks for like active data sharing, you know, active DNS sensors, crawlers, machine learning algorithms, all of this stuff, so that way we can turn this huge stream of ones and zeros into kind of more actionable, you know, suggestions, advice, that sort of thing.
Awesome. Thank you so much.
Of course.
Now, if, for example, if I want to go into attack surface management, what skills would I need, or what would my roadmap look like, you know, coming from a non-technical background?
Sure. So I'd be happy to help answer that. I think one trait that we talked about before, and I think is just super important, is curiosity. Like you're not going to need necessarily the cybersecurity engineering degree to be able to do attack surface management, but you're gonna have to be very curious. And by curious, I mean you're gonna want to be able to look at a lot of videos. There are some good podcasts that help raising visibility. You also have more formalized courses that are existing, like I'm thinking about a few of partners that we've worked with here, and coming to mind, you have OSIN Combine. So OSIN Combine is a company that provides open source intelligence courses and is based in Australia. Now, if you are a Spanish speaker, actually, we can also recommend you a nice place to get started. And I'm thinking here about the Cyber Hunter Academy, which is founded by kind of a buddy of ours, Jezer Ferreira, and he's providing some very useful practical courses to really get started. Then, if you really want to get into it and go the more advanced way, there are a lot of advanced certifications that you can take, and these are very helpful, I think, especially when you're looking to specialize yourself. Now, something else that I found was really good for me, it's actually to get an understanding of what I'm talking about. And by that, I mean getting some practical experience. So, you know, try to identify the type of tools that are open source and maybe you can start playing with. Coming to mind, for example, here is AMAS. So AMAS, actually, it's a very well-known tool in the industry, and it's used for subdomain enumeration and network mapping, and it's very respected. And from there, you can start to aggregate data sources from many different places, so you can even get a very complete picture of what's going on the DNS and on networks. Then another tool that I found was also very helpful was Maltigo. So Maltigo, it's a platform that you can use for security investigations. They allow you to collect data from different sources, kind of contextualize it, and then you can use those different connections to map relations between people, but also organization, domain names, IP addresses, and then again, you know, you have to be very curious, and you have to be willing to test things around to see what results you're gonna get, because you may not get results at the beginning, but then through trial and error, you're gonna learn a lot. Then and possibly here, I'm a little biased because I like to talk about one of the tools that we offer, and it's the Domain Research Suite. And that tool basically gives you access to our WhoisXML and DNS data, and you can use it to run analysis on domains, subdomains, IP addresses, and also DNS infrastructure like like mail servers and name servers.
And this tool that we're talking about, is it only available for big enterprises, or small enterprises can, I mean, small businesses can also use this?
Oh, actually, I think it's open to everyone. Everyone who is willing to give it a shot can do it. We actually have a free plan that allows you to just test things out. So free plan forever. So you can you can maybe get started there. Then if you are more on the bigger business and enterprise side of things, you're probably going to end up talking to my colleague Alex here, who may have some recommendations.
That's right. Yeah, we certainly do, provide enterprise plans, commercial plans, all kinds of things like that. That's where a lot of revenue comes from. But a lot of the joy comes from that. But also, we have a lot of journalists who do research, using our data. It's funny. I was actually just standing in line somewhere, just mindlessly scrolling on Reddit because I have a short attention span and I like infinite data feeds of content. And I came across an article talking about Antifa.com or something like that. And I just happened to kind of read it. I didn't know the journalist or anything like that. And then I found out that they actually used our historic WhoIS records to determine that I think it was Antifa.com was registered in Russia a few years ago. But I think there were other entities trying to say that it was associated with Biden. I think there was actually a redirect. I think if you went to Antifa.com, it would redirect to Biden's campaign website. Right. So it's nice to see that kind of thing out there in nature, and it's affirming to know, that a lot of the paying attention to the shores of the internet, despite what washes away, still is helpful, and in some cases newsworthy.
And so last question, Alex, for you.
Mhm.
IoT devices have significantly increased the attack surface, and massive amount of data that they generate is quite hard to keep track of. What approach should one take while handling them?
Yeah, it's tough. I mean, first you have to get the basics, right? You have to know your inventory, you have to find it all out. But even that, as we've discussed pretty thoroughly here, is not that easy. Uh, you know, Really best recommendation is to hire professional services. Have outlets completely handle that stuff for you and expect that you're going to need multiple. There could be, vendors out there saying, hey, don't worry, we do everything all in one. Maybe that's convenient for you and that's the route you want to go. Fantastic. I would always advise to have, everything covered rather than, trying to go and then save a buck here by having 15 people attack one problem. But there's a lot of really highly effective options out there. And one thing I noticed recently, Chris Kirsch and HD Moore have done some really great work around Rumble and helping IT teams kind of very quickly identify, what's in the network, the surfaces, all that stuff, and kind of like a streamlined, user-friendly way. So I think a lot more of the industry is going to go that route. I think they've cut out a lot of the issues that require a lot of bandwidth and kind of attention and made that a lot faster. There's a lot of really impressive stuff out there. To some extent, if you're going to have a career in security, building out a security platform, expect to work with like a myriad of vendors. Thankfully, it's a fairly small, well-knit community. And again, generally, it's a skeptical community, but also a community that welcomes people again with open arms. So make sure you're working with the right people to what your gut tells you, and find out what you have. Once you know that, decide whether you're going to manage that or reduce that.
Awesome. Thank you so much. No, I totally relate with that. And because not coming from this background and not having experience in cybersecurity, the industry did welcome me with open arms. So yeah, I totally relate with that. So that was Alex Ronquillo and Alexandre François from WhoisXML API. And I forgot to ask you this: where is WhoisXML API headquartered?
Technically Walnut, California, but we're really worldwide. We're a 100% remote team. In some way you could say we're international.
Alexandre, you're joining us from Portugal?
I am actually, yes.
And what about you, Alex?
Yeah, I'm on the outskirts of Los Angeles. I won't get too specific, but it's just far enough from Los Angeles where I can actually get a parking spot and pay a reasonable amount to have a living space.
Awesome. Thank you so much, guys, for your time and talking with me about attack surface management and what who is XML API is doing in this space. I really, really enjoyed our conversation. Thank you so much, and have a beautiful day ahead.
Likewise, have a good one.
Thank you, Ankita.